I'd love to help you get vulnerable. Let's get naked.
Hey everyone, I'm Ann. Welcome to the Let's Get Naked podcast, where we dive deep into vulnerability. In this space, we'll explore what triggers us, uncover the patterns holding us back, and discover how to take charge of our own growth. If you're ready to dig in, be vulnerable, and face the tough stuff, then buckle up. It's time to get naked. Today we're going to be talking about grief. Grief can start in so many ways. When you lose someone who you never thought you'd have to live without. It might be the death of a partner, a parent, a sibling, a friend who was your rock. Or it could be the end of a relationship, when someone you once imagined a future with becomes a stranger. It's the feeling when you realize your childhood home is no longer yours, or when a job you loved fades away, taking your sense of purpose with it. These losses, big or small, expected or unexpected, spark grief. And that grief spreads like wildfire through your life in ways you can't predict. Grief is this massive, uninvited guest that crashes through your life, and no one gives it enough credit for just how much it fucks with everything. It's not just some sad feeling that you feel when you think about a loss. It's this giant, shifting wave of emotion that wrecks your mind, body, and spirit in the most insidious ways. It doesn't have a clear beginning or end. It just starts there, often without warning, and you're left grappling with the emotional aftermath as it bleeds into every part of your life. It's not just the obvious stuff, the sadness or the moments of deep despair. No, grief is like a spider web, stretching into places you didn't even know were connected to your pain. It shows up in the way you interact with people, how you sleep, how you eat or don't, and the strange disconnection you feel with the world around you. You can be fine one moment, and the next you're drowning in this quiet, persistent ache, struggling to breathe under the weight of it all. And the most frustrating part? We're so bad at processing it. Like society has this weird, unspoken timeline for grief, right? People expect you to be over it after a certain period. But grief doesn't fit neatly into that. You can't force it into a box or set a deadline for it to leave. It ebbs and flows, sometimes lurking in the background, and other times hitting you like a ton of bricks when you least expect it. And God help you if you try to numb it or push it away. That's like ignoring a wound and hoping it heals on its own. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. When we leave grief unprocessed, it festers. It takes root in places inside us that we didn't know were susceptible. You start carrying all this unresolved emotional baggage around, and it's not just the past that hurts. You bring that pain into the present, and it messes with your ability to function, to love, to be whole. Grief has a way of coloring your interactions, making you more irritable, more withdrawn, and less capable of really being in the world. You might stop trusting people, stop caring about things you once loved, and end up living in a fog of detached, suppressed emotions. It can ruin your ability to find peace or joy, leaving you stuck in a cycle of resentment or fear. And when we try to rush through grief or sweep it under the rug, we miss the chance to actually learn from it. Because grief, as ugly and painful as it is a teacher. It shows you the depths of your own vulnerability, your ability to love and be loved, your strength in surviving. If you let it, it can be an agent of change. But that requires giving it the space and respect it deserves, something we're not always great at. We need to stop treating grief like it's something to get over or move past as quickly as possible and start embracing it for what it is, a multi-layered, transformative force that takes time, care, and attention to process. If you leave it unprocessed, that's a slow burn. You'll feel it in every part of your life in ways you never expected. It'll ruin your mental health, your relationship, your sense of self, and before you know it, you're a version of yourself that doesn't even resemble who you once were. The damage is real. It's not just sadness. It's the unraveling of the threads that hold your whole damn existence together. Grief deserves to be felt, to be acknowledged, to be processed fully. Otherwise, it'll stick around in ways you can't even imagine, long after the moment of loss has passed. Today, we're stripping it all off with Laura Walton. Laura is a licensed marriage family therapist, grief coach, after-loss professional, yoga instructor, and author. You can find Laura, including online courses that she offers to help work through grief and trauma, at griefonpurpose.com. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
Also joining us today is my youngest brother, Keith, who I also call Tony, as most of you know. Tony is joining us to be able to share and discuss our family's journey with us as it surrounds the grief that the loss of our sister a few years ago brought to our front door. So welcome to you as well.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be back again.
Yeah. For everyone listening, this is going to be a difficult episode for all of us, actually. And so it is what it is. That's real life. Grief is, like I always say, the granddaddy of emotions. So, Laura, I would love to start with you and just kind of hear about your journey and what got you to do what you do for a living, which I find to be fascinating and incredible work that I think is so incredibly important. So if you don't mind just kind of sharing with us your journey for how you got to here.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Well, first, I just want to say, over the last, 15 years or so, at least professionally speaking, grief has become just what I do. Mm-hmm. And, when you do something every day, it just becomes, to some degree, normal. And so hearing what you wrote, that was that was good. And that kind of brought me back to the reality of it, of grief, and like why I'm even here and what I do, why I even do what I do, why it's important. Mm-hmm. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. It was hard to read.
Yeah. But I am a licensed therapist, a grief coach. I got into this, I got into this work because of my life experiences. I wasn't one of those kids who was like, I'm going to be a doctor when I grow up, or I'm going to be a lawyer or whatever. I didn't have a thing I was going to be when I grew up. And then I found myself in my 20s being faced with death right smack there in front of you. My dad committed suicide when I was 21. And when I was 26, the guy who had been my on-again, off-again boyfriend, but more than that, my best friend in the whole world, died of a drug overdose. So both of those situations I was completely unprepared for, and found myself very quickly in the aftermath navigating a world that felt like it was unprepared for me, unprepared for what I was going through with those situations. I couldn't find great support out there. I couldn't find resources. I couldn't find, and me being in my 20s contributed to this, but I couldn't find anybody else who was experiencing this. And given the fact that we will all die at some point, that even then, that struck me as crazy. Yeah. Why is there nothing out here? So it took me some time, but that was what motivated me to go to grad school, became a therapist. I knew I was going to be working with grief from the beginning. And so, eventually was able to start my own practice and work with grief. And then in the more recent years, I feel like I'm kind of growing beyond the box of therapy, trying to broaden my reach and broaden more what I'm able to do. And so that's evolving more into the coaching, and I'm writing a book, and just this whole evolution of my work with grief.
Mm-hmm. I think it's incredible. I really do. I think dedicating your work and your passion to something that's so incredibly important that I think so many people don't talk about. Mm-hmm. I have friends and family, and I think it's just so almost even taboo, which is crazy to me because we're in 2025, and I think we still don't talk about, I'm really struggling with this, whatever it is, right? Obviously, we talk about the loss of family members and parents and siblings and stuff. We still don't. I think people don't know what to say, and so they get twisted up in that. It's so important, I think, to kind of normalize the conversation around that so that we can also support, because I don't know how you processed the grief that you had. Maybe you can share that. But for me, I just about melted my entire life down. because I didn't know how to process regular emotions. And then you hit me upside the head with what I will call the granddaddy of emotions. And it weaseled its way into every aspect of my life, and I just about burned my entire life down because I just didn't know how to handle it, you know? And so when you talk about being 21 and losing your father, which in a horrible way, right? It isn't like, it's obviously tragic enough for somebody to have a heart attack or something, but in such a tragic way, you know, where did you find support, or, you know, or what did that look like for you?
Well, with my dad's death, it was different than my boyfriend's death later. With my dad's death, I think I dealt with it by avoiding it. I, at the time, was actually dating the guy who ended up dying later, but we were a long-distance relationship. And so I ended up leaving Phoenix and going to live where he was living. And it felt like just kind of this, like, I'm done with Arizona, I'm done with my family, I'm done with, you know, like, I'm done with all of this, and I'm just going to go run away from it. And so that was okay for...
Right, until it wasn't.
yeah, until it wasn't. That was okay for 5 years, but then the next death happened, and that blew my world apart. My relationship with the boyfriend who died was better than my relationship with my dad.
Right.
And so that, to me at the time, felt like a bigger loss and a harder loss, but I think it was also compounded with with what I hadn't faced with my dad.
Right, the unprocessed grief that was kind of like following around behind you like a wrecking ball, which I feel like that does when we don't process it.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, for sure. So then, just not knowing how to process all of this when it came smashing down on me was, I guess, initially the part that where I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, there's no guidebook for this.
Right.
There's nobody to, like, help you with this that I could find,
right.
you know? And I was
well, in 20s, it's hard enough to deal with regular life in your 20s, right? You're trying to figure out who you are, or, you know, just some basic stuff.
Yeah.
But on top of that, you're trying to deal with loss at such a big level for both of those things.
Yeah. And some of what I found, like, almost made it worse. Like, I found support groups, but they were for 80-year-olds who's, you know, and there were so many complexities I found, because I was looking for support around losing a partner, but we weren't married.
Right.
We were young, you know, so I found these support groups where, as I said, 80-year-olds' husbands or wives had died.
Right.
But it just felt like, but that's not me. And so that made me feel that much more alone.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't find anybody who is remotely similar to what I was experiencing.
Do you feel like, you know, part of what I said at the beginning about getting through it, or, you know, kind of society's, okay, get over it, or there's a certain expiration date on when your grief should be processed. What are your thoughts on that? What is your kind of your training on that? Or do you get to a point where it's, I've processed that all the way through, or is that just something then that you always will deal with in some capacity?
Yeah, well, everybody seems to have their own idea of some magic number.
Right,
when, and it's
right, like
different
it's been
for everybody.
Right.
Like, but this time by when we should be done grieving, or we should be over it, or it's time to move on. You know, 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever. Like, there is no right or wrong answer. But we get these messages from the people in our lives, or just from society in general, that there is a timeline. And if we're not feeling better, or whatever that means, by that timeline, then there's something wrong with us, or we're doing it wrong.
Right.
So then that can create a whole nother slew of problems, because not only are you grieving and feeling all of that, but then you're doing it wrong.
Right. Which feels terrible in and of itself, right? Like, okay. That's fascinating. Where do you feel like, how long had it been in that process for you, for both of those losses, that you felt like you were able to get some traction on any of the things, any of the tools or direction that you know, were able to find that support that was meaningful and something that actually tracked in with what you were experiencing?
Yeah, so the most meaningful thing that that I felt at the time, and now reflecting back on all the things I've done over the years, I still find it to be true, is my yoga practice. So I had already been practicing. I guess I started practicing yoga after my dad's death, but before my boyfriend's death. So I already had a little bit of experience with that. But there was a yoga teacher training that I did in 2008. My boyfriend had died in 2007. So I think it started almost a year after. That was the thing that was life-changing and transformative. But it wasn't just about, when I say yoga, people often think of the physical poses of yoga.
And the fitness,
and the fitness part. That's what we generally understand yoga to be, in our society at least. So that's a part of it, but it's only one small part of it. And the training that I did and the study that I kind of unknowingly threw myself into was the study of the other limbs of yoga and just how those, what those are, getting a better understanding of what those are. And because of where I was in my life, I applied those to my grief. But if I had to summarize it in one sentence, which is next to impossible to do, but it's the lesson of learning how to relax with what is, learning how to be with something that's really uncomfortable.
Really leaning into that discomfort.
Yes. And so through that yoga teacher training, that was probably my number one big takeaway. And that directly applied to grief.
No, I agree with that. And I think that speaks volumes to me when you say that, because I relay that to, I had never lost anybody until my sister passed away. And so being able to run from it, as I did for a couple of years after she passed, is because I didn't want to lean into the discomfort. I didn't want to sit with it, And so the yoga that you talk about and the being comfortable just sitting with grief, I don't think there's anything probably more painful than sitting with grief. And I think that's why we numb and we try to hide from it and all of the things. But when you realize that it literally is a wrecking ball that you're pulling around behind your life, hurting other people, not being, living your best life, having that spider into all of the different areas of yours, kind of makes it, once you have that awareness, makes it way more important for you to do that work.
Yeah, because we're not taught to do that. We're not taught how to sit with something uncomfortable, period.
Right.
Whatever that is.
Right.
Like, it's so easy just to distract with 10,000 things in any given moment.
Yeah.
So when it comes to grief, we definitely don't know and aren't prepared for how to be with that. But that is the one, I'll use the word key. That is the one key to grief, to being able to, because grief is always going to be a part of your life and your story once you experience it. So in being able to have that be true, we need to be able to sit with it.
I find it fascinating that so many of us have no idea how to deal with grief, because it isn't just the loss of someone. It's the loss of a marriage. It's the loss of something that maybe you were working towards that got pulled out from underneath you for whatever reason in life. I mean, grief is such a big, broad emotion. How could we be so terrible as a society at processing it? Do you find that's have you found that that's more of our society, like America kind of thing? Are there other cultures in other countries that they're better at doing that? Or is that, or maybe that's not even something that you have any idea about?
I don't have a ton of experience in that as far as other cultures, maybe avoidance of it. I do know that some cultures, every culture probably has a different, very general and stereotypical way that they understand death and view death. That applies to some people, but not all. But, in some of the work I've done, I've seen different beliefs where we don't talk about the dead, because they believe that the belief there is that keeps them still in this physical world when they're trying to travel beyond to the next realm or world or whatever that belief is. But we keep them trapped when we talk about them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like I have an understanding that you would want to talk about, right? For me, it's like celebrating my sister on her birthday or speaking about her and really celebrating that and the impact that she had in this world instead of just the opposite. So it's fascinating to me that you say that.
Well, it's interesting, and I'm certainly not going to say any particular culture is right or wrong.
Sure.
But it does make me curious, like, how does that impact your grief process?
Absolutely, right? Because if you are trying to let them go and not remember them and have still a connection, we've talked previously about kind of having a connection with your person after after they've passed, and how important that is for some of us. I think some people definitely don't want anything to do with that. We're going to push that down and push that away, which was definitely what I subscribed to initially. It was, okay, well, she's not here, and so how do I just move on from that? But as I've gone through processing my grief, it's more, how do you celebrate her? How do you celebrate her life? How do you stay connected? When are the times that you do feel connected to that person, even though they're not here with us anymore? So you would think, for me, like, no, we want to remember our people.
Yeah.
Did you have, was your family, do you have siblings? What did that look like when your dad committed suicide? And was like, what did that whole support, or was that everyone go your own direction and not really talk about it much, or what did that look like?
Well, I do have siblings. I'm the oldest. I have a younger sister and a younger brother. And I wouldn't say we've ever been the closest family, and I think that remained true in grief, and in that it was sort of kind of figure it out
Every
on
man
your
for
own.
themselves,
I was I'm the oldest, and I wasn't even actually in the state when it happened. And so I came back to Arizona soon after, but my sister was actually there for what happened and witnessed. He basically, I think he called my sister and told her that he was going to kill himself. And quick backstory, my dad struggled with mental health, and this topic of suicide was not a new topic for us. He had talked about it throughout my childhood. So for him to say, I'm going to kill myself, wasn't something we hadn't heard before, but it's obviously still something you jump at. And he called my sister, who was a week away from turning 18 at the time, and told her that. And she went over to his house, and he also called the police and told them he was going to kill himself. And they showed up, and he had a gun, and he pointed it at them, and they told him to drop it, and he didn't. So they shot him, and my sister was there and witnessed the whole thing. So with that comes a lot, a lot of layers of emotion and beliefs, and how do you make sense of that? So I was, as the big sister, like
big at 21,
well,
right? I mean,
yes,
you were, but that's crazy because you're still a child at 21,
yes.
trying to deal with these huge emotions.
Yeah. But as the older sister, who in some ways I think on reflection of my childhood had felt kind of a sense of responsibility for the younger ones, like that, that carries some weight to it. Mm-hmm. My brother was 14 at the time, so he's a kid too. But in the definitely, I mean, as I said, I dealt with it by moving out of state. Right. So we definitely weren't, like bonding over that or connecting over the experience. It felt like it's like figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, that's so heavy.
I know. I can feel it. It's crazy because
the weight in here is such a lot. It is really heavy in here.
And I've told this story a lot of times before, and it's not new, but it's still, this is the grief. Like it's still true. It's still real. It still holds all of that emotion even now. I can't do math, but over 20 years ago.
Right. And it's still same. So I would love to use this as an opportunity to kind of segue into talking a little bit about, our experience, and I'll share that, and maybe you can offer some insight or ask questions or help along our journey too, because obviously 20 years later, and it still not only brings emotion to you, but to others that hear that story, because you do hear people that struggle with suicidal thoughts. And I've dealt with that in our family, not where someone actually committed suicide, but just the thoughts of that and saying, I'm going to do this, and how scary that is. And you get to where it's not like crying wolf, but crying wolf a little bit, because it's such an emotional roller coaster of, okay, I'm okay, and now I'm not okay, now I'm not okay. And everyone's just trying to do their own lives as well. So regardless of whether it's a family member or not, you still get kind of roped into this whole roller coaster of a whole life with someone. And I'm so sympathetic to that, because it's torture. It's pure torture. So a little bit of a history on the grief that got slammed in our front door, Tony. My sister, who in our birth order, oldest sister, next sister, the one that passed is the second in the birth order, then me, then I have a younger brother, and then Tony is the baby. 10 years ago-ish, our sister she was pregnant with her fourth child, and she was living in an unconventional situation where they were in like a community in wall tents kind of thing. And she decided that she was going to do a home birth with not any professionals. Like, she was 39 years old. You're already high risk. You don't have any business doing that. But she was an hour away from the closest hospital and went into labor. And the midwives in training were not able to provide assistance that she needed. And she died giving birth to her fourth child. And Tony and I were talking the other day about what that phone call felt like and where we were, and trying to get to her, because at the moment of that phone call, they didn't know if she was going to make it, but she wasn't dead yet. They were driving her to the closest hospital and then airlifting her to Nashville. And by the time we got on the ground in Nashville, our other brother picked us up and said that she wasn't going to make it. She was at that point in a coma, but they were just keeping her alive long enough so that we could come say goodbye to her. I feel like, for those that know me, they realize that imploded my entire life, but not in a way that you would maybe even realize from the outside. I was always a big drinker anyways, and I remember coming back from that all happening and doing the funerals and doing the service in Colorado, and I remember sitting at my desk, and there was just nothing in my head. It was just static, and I didn't know what to do. And again, my history with emotions is, fuck them, you don't need them. You know what I mean? What a waste. Those are messy. And so that was literally my entire relationship with emotions up until that point. I was 37 years old at that point, because she was 39. So yeah, I guess it was 10 years ago. And I spent the next 2 years just destroying my life with alcohol, and not even really realizing I was doing that, because I didn't realize what grief was. I was just numbing. I was numbing. And that was just so that I didn't have to feel it. Mm-hmm. And then I got sober, and I realized, holy balls, that's a huge part of it. Obviously, I had other things that were in my past, but the grief component of that, I can't even put words to how that feels. And I know that in dealing with your own grief, and also just helping other people process their own. But to me, on a scale of 1 to 10, that's like a 40 of painful to sit in grief, to really, there's no answers. There's no like, woulda, coulda, shoulda, why did this happen? Like, there's no rhyme or reason to why you lost your dad at 21, why you lost the most important person in your life at 26. I mean, you're a baby at 26, right? And even though I was 37 and my sister was 39, it's like, there's no rhyme or reason. She's here one day, gone the next. I have spent a lot of time over the last 10 years really kind of processing that. I feel like I've gotten better at it. The first couple of years of drinking and whatnot. And then just really doing therapy and lots of different healing modalities to work through that. I still think there's a pile there, I think you start with like, here's this pile of grief maybe, and then, not that it's ever gone, but I think there's definitely, when you're ready to tackle that, a lot more to tackle. Tony, maybe you can share where you have been with the grief process for that, or, what that looked like for you, or your understanding of grief from, maybe a person who didn't deal with that before. Just, Laura, for your information and our listeners, Tony also subscribed to the same, who needs emotions? Fuck them. My other brother, same, right? We all just joked around for so many years that we were dead inside. We were happy to be that way, even before she passed. So then when you have something like this that happens, it feels like someone brought a ton of cement and just poured it on top of you. And it's like, I don't know how to deal with joy and peace and, happiness and sadness and the regular ones. Now here's grief, So Tony, what did that look like for you?
It looked like processing anything else that was undesirable for me. I see kind of a pattern with dealing with things like that because our mother lost both of her sisters at an early age too, and I was around for both of their deaths for some reason. That just seems to be a weird thing. And then one of our uncles passed away, and we've had multiple outside family members pass away that we weren't necessarily super close with. And I feel like, and I have never really delved into it, but I feel like it was just okay, this event happened, now we're moving on to the next. And that is kind of what happened with Maureen. It was a little more drawn out because we got that phone call, we had to scramble, we got over there, we had a funeral, then we went to Colorado, we had a funeral, and it was a lot of moving around, and I wasn't with everybody when, like over Easter, I remember that year, everybody was up in Colorado, but for some reason I was down here by myself. And I remember distinctly one of the things that I thought was, I'm so relieved that she's not here anymore for her own sake. Of course, we all want her here, but given her situation, given that she thought she had no other options and no other choices, I think I found some solace in that, even though it wasn't the answer that I wanted and it wasn't what any of us wanted. I don't know if that's just like a really messed up way to look at things of like, yeah, she's not dealing with all that. She's not having to sacrifice everything about who she is and what she is because she doesn't feel like she has any other way out. And also I happened to be in Colorado when they were up there the month prior. So it was very short. Like I saw her, and then the next time I saw her, she was no longer. And that is a lasting memory for me and I thankfully have that picture of her riding the horse, which is always where she wanted to be. That's all she wanted to do. And there was another component of that for me that was like, I'm so glad I got to see her at that time, because my relationship with her was probably just as weird as it was with everybody else. Like we talked, we didn't really necessarily have any drama or problems or anything, but it was a struggle. She had things going on, I had things going on. We were trying to do all that. But she had been removed out of my life outside of phone calls and things and the rare visit for so many years and so long that it also was okay, well, she's just no longer here. And it didn't never really click in my brain of like the gravity and just the gravity of the whole situation. It was, okay, well, this all happened. Okay, well, I have to prepare for my trip to Europe. So I'm going to go to Europe. And then, I get back from Europe and now I have to have surgery. So I'm just going to go into surgery. And then, okay, I have 4 months off and then I'm going to go into another surgery. And then we're going to go to Colorado and then we're going to go do this. And then all of these things, and now that I'm thinking about it, I've never thought about it before. Maybe not necessarily things that I chose to numb with, but they were helping me numb because I'm really good at completely pushing everything back, completely ignoring things, and just going on with my day because I have something else to do. The same thing, and I don't ever want to compare the death of an animal to a death of a relative, but I did the same thing when I had to put my dog down. I was devastated in the moment. We put her down, I left, and then I just, okay, well, I had to go get ready for my trip. I have to sell my house, and I had to go get ready for this other trip. And then it was just like, okay, well, that event happened in that 3-hour window, and then I never got really sad about it again. So for me, it was the exact opposite of what you experienced. You didn't know how to handle it. Well, I didn't know how to handle it either. I just blocked it away. That's how I handled it.
Right.
And never processed it. And I've spoken about it in therapy, not anything that I've really delved into. And like we spoke about it probably for an hour session. And one of the things that she told me, because I felt, again, going back to what is our timeline for how long we're supposed to feel sad? When do we get over that? Do we ever get over that? I was like, I feel like I kind of got over that really fast, and that doesn't feel right. And I remember her distinctly, because I also look at our mother, who the loss of a child is devastating, but it took her many years to be able to get to a point where she was okay talking about Maureen. And I asked her about that. I'm like, I feel like I had this blip in my life. It was really sad and it was tragic. We're missing a piece of our family. But then I just moved right on. And then the opposite side of that is for years, other people are processing it and holding on to it and dealing with it. And I don't remember exactly what she said to me, but it was something along the lines of, we do that to ourselves. So for me, it was like, okay, well, maybe I didn't process it enough, and maybe I didn't give it the amount of time that it needed, or the amount of effort or work that it needed to process that through. But then I felt a little bit relieved because I didn't want to keep myself in that. So now when I talk about it, people are devastated. I tell them the story and I talk about it just like I'm talking right now, very like nonchalant, like, yeah, it happened in my life. And other people are like, oh my God, that's such a big deal. I'm so sad for you. I mean, I've had people start tearing up on me.
That's a big deal.
It is.
It's a terrible situation.
It's horrible. And for me, I'm just like, oh yeah, it just happened.
So Laura, I would ask this question just based on listening to him talk. Not that I'm trying to like, hey, let's get naked. Come on, we're going to therapize you. You're not moving anywhere, Laura. Get him. That's kind of everyone at the home listening. That's what this feels like. Yeah. That's not what this was. But it's interesting because, I look at how I processed grief, right? Because I don't think it's ever anything where you're like, da-da-da-da, I'm out of this now and I don't have to deal with this anymore. But to your point of, then I just do the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, because even though I was just drinking, I wasn't really processing it. I was just not processing it in the same way that you running and just piling stuff on top of. But then what does that look like, Laura, as far as just unresolved or unprocessed grief? Because part of what I said at the beginning, where it just kind of like seeps into your entire life, if you don't deal with that, what does that look like?
It can look like a lot of different things, but I think whether it's, a year from then or whether it's 30 years from then, grief keeps knocking. Yeah. And it gets louder and louder and louder until eventually something breaks. And it sounds like for you, like the drinking was somehow, like there came a point when you decided you had to stop that.
I was literally destroying my entire life with alcohol just because I was literally hiding from the knock. Yes. I didn't want to answer the door. And so it was just put more alcohol on it. Doesn't matter if what time of day you're drinking or how much you're drinking or the fact that you're not paying attention to any of your family, the fact that you're doing things that are out of character for who you are. Doesn't matter. We're just going to keep going down that road until I just literally could not do that anymore. Yeah.
So there comes a point when you can't do it anymore, when you can't pretend you're not hearing the knock. And that point obviously looks different for everybody, and that point comes at different times for people. But the grief, in my experience with myself and others, it demands to be seen. And it will patiently, or not so patiently, wait for a while. But sooner or later, it's going to show up in some way.
How do you invite it to the table with you? Say, for example, just because you're sitting here and we're picking on you, Tony. Say, for example, he says, I feel like I've never dealt with that. I feel like I ran and ran and ran. I had one therapy session. I feel like I'm good. Put it back up on the shelf, whatever. There's a lot that goes into what you just said. I don't know if you realize that or not. With, I felt relieved because she wasn't here anymore. I felt the exact same way. That made me feel guilty. I think that that's probably, maybe you had that with your dad as well, Laura, where it was like, at least he's not suffering anymore. For someone that went on for a lifelong. Our sister was with someone who was, I don't even know, how do you just...
Undesirable by the most of the population.
I mean, just heinous. Just a man that was just, had her doing things that we don't think were her choice, but again, she was stuck. And then I had all of these other feelings of not being able to save her, because when she was early on with him, I'm like, come live with me. I'll take care of finances. I literally was, come on, I will save you. And then that obviously is my, shit to deal with as well, with it's not your job to save other people and like all of the things, but the feeling of relief, the feeling of any of the feelings that you feel, that's obviously more than just a 1 hour therapy session. And I think you know that. I mean, this isn't like a surprise where we're surprising Tony with like, hey, we're going to give you some free therapy to deal with this. But if grief does keep knocking and does keep knocking, if you're at a point where you realize, okay, I have this grief, not just for you, just for the listeners, how do you invite that to the table and say, okay, I'm ready to start having a relationship with you, because I do think that grief is that big of a deal, where you do need to say, okay, how am I going to process this? But how would you suggest to people to be able to start that, or to be able to kind of advance their journey as it relates to that?
Yeah, I think part of it is being really intentional and purposeful with it, hence the grief on purpose name. Yes. But because as Tony, you were saying, like, you can, it's so easy, you're not the only one by any means. Like, it's so easy to get busy with our lives and be like, but I already have this thing planned and I have to do this and then I have to do, like, that's how we live a lot of the time. And so even if we do want to feel our grief in that, it's easy to not. So I think just being really, I think it can be very important to be intentional and purposeful about it and create space for that grief to be. That can look like a lot of different things, but maybe most simply just when we're feeling ready to, or interested in, or curious about our grief, just to give ourselves a couple minutes just to sit with that question of, where is my grief? How is my grief? What is my grief? And start to get curious about it.
I love that. Not that it's so funny to me, because the work that I do, not only with this podcast, but with other things, it's all the gross stuff. It's all the hard stuff. It's all the shit that it's like, no, thank you. And I totally get that. But I will say that as I've gone in life, and in the last 8 years for me, I am a much better person. I am a much happier person. I am a much all the things, because I've been willing to get curious and say, okay, what does grief look like in my life, for not only the loss of people that were close to me, but other things as well? Because I think grief is like, it rides in its own satchel, and you just keep adding stuff to it. And like I said, I think you do pull it behind you like a wrecking ball. Yeah.
And there really is beauty in grief. Like, if you haven't, in my experience, if you haven't experienced the depths of all the emotion that's entailed in grief, then it's really hard to experience the other side of that coin. Right? If you haven't been in the deepest, hardest, heaviest, darkest place, then you can't experience the lightest, highest, most joyful.
Yeah. And I agree with that 1,000%, because I think when you numb and you kind of leave your emotions at like a flat line, because you're not willing to deal with the things that are nasty and gross and low and all of that, you don't get the highs either.
Yeah.
And the highs to me are outstanding.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't even put words to how great you can actually feel. So I was talking to somebody recently about what that looked like, me getting sober and doing all of this work and kind of being willing to use my emotions as a tool, I felt like I was good before. And I look back and it's like, maybe I was a 4 out of a scale of 1 to 10. That's literally how big of a deal I feel like it is now, that I'm willing to feel the emotions and feel them as they come up. And it's not at convenient times always. You know, I'm coming into today with, I'm already raw from other things, and that's just the universe's way of like, go ahead and cry on your own podcast. It's going to be fine. But you know, the universe will just tell you when it's time to be able to do that, and the knock and the however loud that gets, and when you're ready to sit down and say, okay, come out to play. I'll sit with you, no matter how bad that hurts, because that's a small percentage of time as you process that to really open your life up to get the highest highs.
Yeah. And there, you know, as all the years pass by for me, as we've already said multiple times today, there's the expectation that I'm ever going to be done with grief, or that it's ever going to be over, just is not true.
Right.
Like, this is going to be a part of my life forever. And also, I've been noticing now that some more time has passed, like the way that my grief has shifted, and the way that my relationships with the people who I've died have, first of all, continued on,
right,
in different form, and shifted. And that's a really cool, interesting piece of it that is sort of just starting to make its appearance to me, because I had to, of course, go through, I had to process the initial shock and hurt and sadness and everything associated with the deaths themselves to get to this place, I think.
Right.
But now I can feel I can feel a connection with them.
Yeah.
I can feel it more at different times. I feel like I still have an ongoing relationship with them. And there's something really cool about that.
I think you're absolutely right. Tony, do you understand that? Do you feel like you have a connection with Maureen? Not at all.
I don't feel like I have a connection with much of anything, and I don't know if that's because I'm not open up to things like that, or if it's because I've never explored it, or if...
Because you have a dump truck full of grief
basically
riding around behind you.
And it's interesting because you're talking about like the knocks and things like that. I'm like, I don't experience that. So if I don't have a knock and I don't have the whatever, like this half back is blocked. It's just pushed back and pushed back. And maybe not. I don't know. That's the hard part, is like I don't know enough about that to really understand that. But like when you're always talking about, Maureen did that today, or Maureen did, I don't experience those things, or I'm not paying attention.
Right. Well, I think also, like, if you just kind of open that door, when you get to the point where you're ready, of saying, I'm ready to process this, and I'm going to sit and get quiet and get curious about some of the things, and how did that make me feel, and, you know, either taking quiet time, going for a hike, journaling, like whatever it looks like, to honor your body for whatever it will tell you once you kind of say, okay, invite grief to the table, and then just go with whatever it says to do. But I feel like the connection that I have with her is definitely more because I was willing to kind of sit in the muck. And I agree with you. I think that it's super special, because she does. She shows up for me in the most unusual ways, and sometimes just when I need her, and sometimes, you know.
Yeah.
Whenever. And it's a beautiful thing. It makes me feel like I have a secret.
Yeah.
That's so special.
Yeah.
You know, it's giving me full body chills, because she was important to us, you know. And for me, I didn't talk to her for the last year and a half before she passed, because I drank a lot, and she wouldn't listen to me about that motherfucker that she was married to. And she was so twisted up with that guy. And it was like, I will do whatever I need to do to get you away from him. And it was, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And it was like, but you don't have to do this, you know? And she just, God damn it, she wouldn't listen, which none of us would, right? If I came to you, Laura, and said, like, you got to stop doing whatever it is, but you're like, no, this is my life. I'm not going to do that. Like, it's not my job to run yours. But I was so cocky and so just, let me save you. No, I didn't realize it then. I was just trying to be helpful. But so I had too much to drink, and I told her off, and then I didn't talk to her for a year and a half, and then she died. And it was like, the guilt of that and the weight of that. And I tell the girls that all the time because they fight my daughters. I tell them, don't leave it like that. It's fine if you don't want to talk. Take space if you guys, don't want to, but don't leave it on bad terms because I'd give anything to be able to apologize to her in person. Yeah. I apologize to her, to her spirit all the time because and she knows, she's always known, her and I were 18 months apart and she was always a better human being than I ever was, which is awesome. So no, Tony, I encourage you, I encourage any of our listeners to just get to a point where you're ready to explore that because you say, I don't have that, I don't feel that, I don't hear the knock. The knock is happening. The universe is knocking. You don't have to listen, but it's there, right? Because in different ways, I think a big part of you and your journey of things is just also being quiet enough and being willing enough to allow those things to come in, which is a feat in and of itself because it's not pretty work. It's stuff that is gross and nasty, but if you knew that you could work through that and you could get to the other side of that and your life is amazing, where you feel these incredible highs and you understand how, what grief is and what that looks like, and then also being able to help other people. Because, Laura, you have to have so many people in your life that are like, say more, tell me, because it's just a topic that no one ever talks about. So the fact that you are willing to talk about it, the fact that that is what drives you, the fact that that is what your life's purpose is, and that you're willing to talk about all the gross things that come out because of that. I mean, it's impressive to me.
Well, thank you. Sometimes I feel like I'm the downer. Let's talk about death.
I have found my match in that because I swear to God, like for me, I want to always talk about deep things, like I have a podcast where I'm like, let's talk about the grossest shit you can come up with and like the things that are shameful and the things that are fears and, all of these low vibe, gross things that everybody has, right? But nobody wants to talk about. We want to talk about the lipstick and the pretty and the Instagram and the filters and like all of that shit. And I'm like, that's not real life. So I feel like I'm the boner killer all the time, but I've met my match in Laura because she's like, hey, what do you do for a living? Help people with grief. But you're super comfortable with it in a way that to me, I think makes it approachable. As my middle daughter always says, she goes, 10 out of 10 people die. I don't know why everyone's so weird about it. And I don't either. I think we should normalize the conversation around death in all of its forms. Right? Death where it's tragic, death where it's suicide, death where it's drug overdoses. Those are all really horrible, nasty things. But that's life. Yeah. Right? We all deal with that. And if no one knows how to process that and it's just keep pushing it down or pushing it back and keep going and keep going and keep going, we're robbing ourselves of being able to live our life to the fullest expression that we can. And so once you know that, doesn't that make you want to go, okay, let me go see what that is about.
Sometimes no.
Yeah. And so no, it's good for you to give that input of saying like, no, I'm still not interested in what you guys are peddling here.
No, I'm totally interested in it. I love it, but it's interesting because as you're talking, I'm sitting here thinking about when you're look on the other side. It's going to be so much more fantastic and whatever. I am currently living 100 different situations where I'm exploring why I'm doing something the way, or I allow people to treat me a certain way and just be used as a doormat or whatever. But I think especially when it comes to the grief for me and just so many areas of my life, the unknown is really fucking scary. And it doesn't matter that logically I understand I'm going to feel better if I can stand up for myself to this one person and be like, don't fucking talk to me like that. It's going to feel much better because either they're going to respect that or they're not, and they're not going to be in my life anymore.
And you're better off either way.
Exactly. Yeah. Logically, that all makes sense. It does not happen like that. Of course, it's easier to say, yes, I need to deal with my grief and whatever. Sometimes the fear of changing how you are and what you've been living is enough to hold you back. And I'm exploring that in so many facets of my life that yes, logically, I would love to change this. I don't want to be like this anymore. I feel the strong being inside that I used to have in certain situations. And not that it was, I'm overpowering people and I'm trying to be this bully or whatever, but just like my capabilities. But all of that fear and all of that childhood trauma and all of the, I don't know why I do this. Oh, wait, now I know I do this. let's figure that out. Sometimes that fear is much greater and much more powerful than the desire and the will to change.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true for a lot of people. And that, what we're talking about the light and stuff, that is possible, but also it can take a whole lot to get there, and can be really hard and really painful. And the walking down that dark, unknown path, the fear of that can absolutely be enough to, I'm not going down there.
Yeah, it's debilitating.
Yeah.
Well, and especially I think for Tony, because he's at this place where, I hope you don't mind that I share this, but just being willing to, I love the eyes that he makes at me. He's like, well, you're already sharing it, so what the fuck am I supposed to do to stop you? But just being willing to even, feel any of the feelings, right? So for me, for Brennan, for you, who just pushed down emotions our entire life and literally just had a joke up until late 30s of like, I'm dead inside. That's just who I am. And it just was. I mean, it's for you, for him, for me. But even having him come down here and be on the podcast and having him talk about some of the stuff that he is and the things that have opened up for him, it's like, holy shit. Like every time I hear either of you guys, I'm so proud and I'm so impressed because you do it on your own time. That's not for me to pick. I deal with my own shit on my own time. But I'm impressed because it is scary work, and the fear of the unknown can be debilitating. I just happen to be in this place in my life where I'm like, I'm not going to live in fear. That's but I did for so long of just I don't, that looks messy, and so we're just going to go this other direction no matter what that other direction looks like. So to be able to say, I'm not going to let that run things, and I'm going to go into it. God, it's scary. It's scary.
But it's much less scary, I think. And I think you and I have talked about this. The support system that we have at the office right now is grand.
It's grand. It's grand.
I've never, because you don't expect that at work.
Yeah.
And I've never really had that. So I can talk to anybody about anything. I don't want to say without judgment, but for the most part, without judgment.
Who's judging you? Because I'll go talk to them right now.
But it's funny because it's like the joking judgment. It's not like, oh my God.
Yes.
What? But understanding that each one of us is in a different path. Each one of us brings different things to the table. We can learn from each other. Some of us are twinning, some of us are not. But I also think to that point, when you're scared shitless to try to break beyond something, it makes a difference of who you have around you. So for me, you all are my friends and the people I spend the most time with. So being able to say like, hey, this is what's going on. I'm like, oh yeah, I've experienced that too. If for nothing else, then I feel heard. Mm-hmm. Somebody else understands what I'm going through. I'm not alone. The other part of that is my therapist. Mm-hmm. The way that she speaks to me and sometimes says, first of all, I want to thank you for being willing to share that. Yeah. Because there are times in therapy, I feel comfortable enough to tell her anything and everything. There are times that I might tell her later than I should have or would have. But it takes an act of strength and power to be able to be that vulnerable because it's a lot and there's a lot. Even, some of the decisions that I've made recently. Sure. And I've spoken to her about that.
Sure.
And I'm like, I'm so ashamed. I don't feel guilty.
Right.
I feel ashamed because I can see this stuff and I'm just barging right in, like eyes wide open. Yeah. But being able to have somebody who says, I want you to know that I see somebody who's strong and honest and gives himself to others and helps others and does all these things, because I'm sitting here thinking like, oh, I'm a broken man and whatever. But being able to have somebody else who speaks to you that way and helps you see yourself that way, in addition to having the other support of, yeah, it's okay. Yes, this is scary. It's a lot less scary when you have good people around you.
Yeah. Well, and we all just want to be heard and seen, in any of the stuff that we're dealing with, and that's extremely important. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you guys both for coming today. We're running out of time, but yeah, this has been a really important conversation, and we will definitely continue this in the future, because I think normalizing death and grief and processing emotions and what all of that looks like is extremely important, because you're not unique, Tony, in the way that you were raised with not processing emotions. And why does it feel so, you have to feel so brave to be vulnerable? And it does. I don't disagree with you. Like, I have to boss up every time I come sit on this couch and say, oh shit, what am I going to say today? Because it's so incredibly vulnerable. But I have to believe that people hearing that, people understanding what other people's journeys are, will help them. Maybe it sparks something. Maybe it's an idea of like, oh, I didn't think about doing that, or oh, that's a resource. Who knew that there were lovely ladies like Laura out here who literally deals with grief, specializing in that. That's powerful. And grief on purpose, right? That's where you can find Laura's Grief on Purpose. That's huge. Being intentional about processing that instead of just letting that happen to you. It very much goes into the, you're happening to life, not it's happening to you, but be intentional about what you're willing to deal with for yourself. So for that, thank you guys both for coming on and being vulnerable.
Thank you.
That's our time for today. If you have questions or suggestions, send us an email. Our email address is ladies@letsgetnakedpodcast.com. And then do all the things to support the pod. Follow, share, rate, and review. And we'll catch you next time. That's a wrap.
I'd love to help you get vulnerable. Let's get naked.